Hi, this is Christina Adams, and this is the place where we talk about God, Christianity, and life. Right now, I'd like to discuss Foxe's Book of Martyrs versus Martyrs Mirror. Now, both of these books were written a few hundred years ago at this point. Foxe's Book of Martyrs was written by John Foxe in 1563. It was during the reign of Queen Mary I, and she was had a Catholic background, and her father had made England Protestant. And when she took the throne, she made it so that Catholicism was the main religion in England. And the Catholics then, during that time, they ended up persecuting the basically Protestant. I think they were probably more Anglican, but the Protestant pastors and such who did not want to go back to being Catholic. And Foxe's account is basically just the stories of their trial, of these people's trials, and the the beliefs that they had, and how they died. So it is a really interesting story, especially historically, and it kind of gives us an example, especially now, of why we wanted to have the separation between church and state in America, because we didn't want to have a state picking a denomination and then deciding to kill anybody else who was not part of that denomination if they did not convert. So there was that one. The other one is Martyrs Mirror. Martyrs Mirror was written about 100 years later in 1660, which is easier to remember because of that. And it was written by, I'm not really sure how to pronounce the guy's first name. I think it might be something like Thieleman or Thieleman von Braght, and he was a Dutch Anabaptist, as far as I know, or a Mennonite of in that vein of denomination. And he basically did a very similar thing to what Foxe did, in that he also gives a list of all the people, specifically those who were Anabaptists, and he then records what they believed, what they argued for, who was against them, and who persecuted them, and how they ended up dying, and the kind of testimony that they gave when they died. So both books are actually very similar, with the difference being that von Braught's Martyrs Mirror ends up going a little bit farther into the future than John Foxe could. And he also tends to focus more on people who were in Netherlands and German, Prussia area. And because of that, a lot of the names are not as familiar as Robert Smith or William Hunter or names like that. So because of that, the name is a little bit different. But the general premise of both books is actually the same. And the interesting thing about them, especially if you're at all interested in martyrology, but the interesting thing is that they both start at the same point. They start with either Christ or with Stephen and their deaths, and then they move forward in history very slowly, listing all the different people who have died. So they'll do the apostles, and then they'll do Polycarp and Irenaeus and various others as they move forward into the present. And then when they get to their time period, that's when they really start to flesh the stories out and to give more theological reasons. And then there also tends to be a sharper contrast between those that they would say are being persecuted and their persecutors. So both of these books, what they're actually doing is they're making an argument, and they're saying that the original church, the original theology, it started at this point, and then it moves forward into history, into our current denomination or our current people. And you can tell that we are the ones that have kept the pure doctrine because of how we died. And how we died is in the same way that the apostles did, with the same type of boldness, with the same type of persecution, the same type of people who were not able to see the truth. And so because of that, both Foxe's Book of Martyrs and Martyrs Mirror, they do tend to paint the people who are persecuting them in a not not necessarily untrue, but definitely a darker tone, and definitely like these people very well could not be the true church. And so if you happen to be Catholic, or I think the Anabaptists, they aren't particularly fond of Protestants either. So if you happen to be Protestant and you read Martyrs Mirror, some of the things that they can say, especially about those who were in charge, are they're very dogmatic about, we're right and these people are wrong, and we have the true faith. So it actually is really interesting too that both books have the same type of argument, because they both start in the same way and they both then move to the present. But then the Anabaptists, they're using the same argument that the Protestants did against the Catholics, and they're also kind of using it a little bit against both the Catholics and the Protestants. And so it's like a even farther distinction between them. And the thing is that the way that we live in, the world that we live in now, we don't really live in a world where denominations try to kill each other, which is a good thing. But back in those days, they did, and it was seen as normal, especially if you have something like salvation, or the salvation of people. And these people, they were willing to confess what they believed to be true, and they were also willing to die for it. And so just for that reason alone, it is really interesting to read their stories and to read the things that they believed, the things that they were willing to die for. Now, I have to make a quick disclaimer in that I actually have not read the complete versions of either John Foxe or Martyrs Mirrors, in part because John Foxe, Foxe's Book of Martyrs, there are a bunch of different versions out there, but there actually isn't a complete published version of all of his stories. So what he had done is he would go around, and he lived in England at the time, or actually I think he had to leave. But he would get letters from people, and he would then include their stories. And some of the interesting thing is that I was able to find some of the actual transcripts. So that there's this guy named Robert Smith, and Robert Smith's actual transcript that he wrote while he was in prison of his interrogation and how it went, that transcript is actually available online, and it's very similar to what John Foxe has. So either he had the transcript at some point, or he knew of it, or someone gave him something that was very close to it. And so it's really interesting how he kind of just gathered all the letters together. I'm not entirely sure how Martyrs Mirror was brought together, but I haven't read all of that one either, partially because that book is about 1,000 pages long. It's pretty big. And they also take a good portion of that to explain not just what proper doctrine is and what proper baptism is, but who believed what and how their theology might have started to change, and all of these different things. So it can get a little bit repetitive where that's concerned. And to some of their stories, like it's like after a while, sometimes you read one and you're like, wait, I'm pretty sure I've read this story before, but you haven't. It's just a lot of the same types of stories are being told and explained. Now, one of the things that I found fascinating about both, originally, John Foxe, I've known of John Foxe, and I've read Foxe's Book of Martyrs since I was a teenager. So it's had a profound impact on my life. And I've always thought it was really interesting to hear about all of these things like Peter and Paul. And you never know, like what happened to them, because Acts just ends. And so it was always really interesting to me to read what happened with them. But the copies of Foxe's Book of Martyrs that I've had, they never actually went into other people, like Thaddeus or Simon the Zealot or Mark or Luke or Timothy, and Martyrs Mirror actually does. And so that was something that I found that was really interesting, because Martyrs Mirror, it has a whole bunch of the early church, and it actually will give like a list of names of people. So like they'll have a person's name, and then they'll say this person was one of the 70 that Jesus had sent out. And it's just like, wow, like I never even knew anyone's name from the 70. I don't even know where they would have gotten that kind of information. I mean, I'm assuming they probably got it from histories in the Catholic Church, or perhaps Eusebius or something like that. But at this point, and one of the other things I really liked about Martyrs Mirror is that it includes, at the bottom of each story, at least the version that I had, it included all of these notations of what book they actually got as a source. And I think Eusebius was one of those sources, but I don't know if he was a source for all of the earlier stuff. But like it has Onesimus in there. It has Aristarchus, or yeah, something like that, and has Timothy. And it's just really neat to be able to see, oh wow, like these are the people that, like I had Simon the Zealot, and it was quite a few, maybe like 5 or 6 of people that they would have considered to be part of the 70. And yeah, so it was really neat. Oh, I think it also had Matthias. Yeah, so I thought that was really neat, because it's really interesting to hear what actually happened to the apostles after after the New Testament happened. So if you have a chance to check one or the other out, at least now you know what you're getting into. And if you've ever read either one, and I'd like to know what you thought about it and what kinds of things you found interesting. So I hope you have a great day. God bless.